So, fantastic. So I do speeches all the time with different companies, and I normally do it off the cuff. But this time I've decided to write it down because I think that when I did my last one, I didn't have a format that would be the best I could do on this kind of environment, and I have some sort of visual imagery in my head. So to give some background about my work, you can probably see I've got all of my mad things around me, but these were part of a collection I did with Mac, and they're like stickers they're all me in different guises. So every single year for the last 20 years, I've taken on a new identity within my work, and I've started to do like all these different tributary stuff to kind of celebrate that I've used transformation as a means to cope with things, and that's what my presentation is going to be about. So I'm going to read it from my laptop, which I will not do when I'm on a stage, but I don't want it to be less than good. But if you want me to do it without that, I can do it without that, but I'd prefer to, if that's okay. So no, it's more about how I kind of realised when I was a kid I'm a trans person, and I looked androgynous since I was a tiny, tiny child. And because I was so different and I grew up in such a different environment to, I think, most of the people I went to school with, I didn't have access to a lot of pop culture references because my family were religious. I kind of saw things almost objectively instead of experiencing them as my friends did. And when I realised that people treated me differently if they thought I was a boy, they thought I was a girl, I worked out that I could use things to transform. I could use not only my visual transformations to change my quality of life, but I could output things. If I was going through a horrendous experience of bullying as a kid, I could do something artistic that would really transform it. So I'm presenting almost like a method that people can use to transmute their trauma through transformation, whether it's an artistic transformation, whether it's looking at things from a different perspective. So it's more so about, I guess, like overcoming obstacles through the methods that I've learned. And I'm just giving some anecdotes where I specifically have done so. Thank you. All right, tell me when I'm good to go. Perfect. So if I had like a perfect setting, which I'm totally open if I don't, I'd have almost like a movie that was playing behind me that showed references to what I was referring to, kind of in a similar way to the stickers have all depicted me in different ways. So I'd like to show them as examples when I'm going through things. So my name is Joseph Harwood, and I believe in the power of transformation. Transformation has always been an interesting concept to me because it can be permanent, temporary, profound, or subtle. Your mind, your body, your perceptions, your relationships, your art, your identity can all transform. Even trauma can be transformed. It doesn't vanish, but it can be reimagined as a source of strength and creativity. So I grew up in Brighton between two different kinds of families. My mum's parents were religious and were part of a church. My dad's family had a private care facility for ladies with disabilities. So it's very, very unique experience growing up here. I was quite different looking as a kid, and I would always be stopped, even on the bus, by like old ladies that would come over to me and be like, "Oh my God, there's an adorable little girl." But my grandparents always be like, "That's my grandson, that's my grandson." And I didn't even know how to respond to it, but I just paid attention to how people used to be fussy about it and just confirming my gender identity. Even before I even had a gender role, I mean, I was a kid. I wasn't really given a lot of exposure to pop culture, so I wasn't aware of all the incredible androgynous people that were in showbiz. I just felt very different. I didn't have a role model or an example to follow like me, and I think you sometimes need to see it to be it. You do need those role models to kind of achieve what you want to go in life, and I didn't have one. But one thing that I was really allowed to do, it was a rare thing because I wasn't allowed to watch things like Billy Elliot, I was allowed to play video games that were, my family were technophobics, they didn't have a clue what they were, but for me they were my escapism. I was able to explore fantastical worlds and stories without them being too strict on the content. My favourite video games were all like the books I read. They were mythical quests and amazing magic, strange creatures and witches. But unlike the front page of the books I loved, the characters in video games were also androgynous. They looked like me. It was the first time I'd seen something that I could relate to, and I was fascinated by how you could play as an ensemble cast, one day being the fighter wielding a big sword, the next a lion with a magical ring. Make no jokes about that. There were visuals that I looked to and I wanted to be, and I left a mark on my imagination. I love playing as the anti-hero, the underdog. I love the possibilities of being all the different characters and seeing how the progression of the story would change. I would draw out my own characters and costumes and faces, and I would enact all the different narratives that I could think of with my own designs. I remember very early on being told that I was spending far too much time on the computers, but it was my getaway into a different world and I loved it. I quickly learned how to investigate the files that built the games. I was able to find JPEGs of the characters' faces and skins, and it was like dissecting how the visuals came together. They were all actually genderless 3D models with different images on top of them. It was kind of profound. I started to see how my mum would wear makeup and my grandparents were so close, and I began to visualise how I could turn my drawings into 3D reality, similarly to those 3D models I saw in the game files. Obviously, all of this represents the fact that I needed escapism from my very strict, very isolated life where I didn't quite fit in. I didn't feel like part of a group or even the same as anyone. People treated me differently because they couldn't work out if I was a boy or a girl, and I noticed it heavily. I used painting and sewing costumes as a way to represent what I was feeling and experiencing, and without being conscious of it, I was tangibly downloading my experiences into physical objects. I was able to use different art formats, and once the experience was outside of my mind, it could be looked at objectively, in I guess the same way that a therapist can mirror your thoughts back to you. Once you see them, they end up being less scary and less about you and more ephemeral. You can transform your negative experiences into something tangible and something creative. I learned a lot of lessons from playing video games. You can grind and work super hard to level up your skills, but unlike those games, we live in the real world and you can't have a reset button. You don't save your game and try again. You have to write your own manual and be prepared for things when they don't come together. When I got to secondary school, I was heavily bullied for looking like a girl. I was also offered the chance to study my high school education 6 years early. So yes, I was not only very unusual looking, but I was also an absolute geek. No matter how hard I worked, I wasn't beating the bad guys, and I started to realise that they came in all formats. And one individual can be both the hero and the villain. That was something that I noted. Some of the teachers were particularly villainous in my high school experience, but that's a story for another day. What it taught me was that I had to transform again. Instead of being innocently androgynous looking, which I'd lived as a kid, I was going to change my image like the characters I've been designing. I was going to become an androgynous superhero like the characters from the video games. And that is exactly what I did. I very quickly learned about social media, which was beginning at that stage. I joined MySpace at 13 and began to learn to create visuals in different formats. I themed my pages in different artistic styles and used music, graphics and illustrations to share who I was. It was another way to create something outside of me that represented me and could act as both a channel and an armour. I still hadn't learned about any of the superstars in pop culture at this time who were also gender ambiguous, so I had no idea what the impact of this new kid from Brighton, who looked like a pop culture reference from the 80s, meant. I just did what I thought was a video game character, but the results were pretty astounding. People were responding to me positively. I found myself being followed by over 500,000 people across my first page, and they were being nothing but nice to me. I was asked to model in London. I'd never even been to London on my own before, and I had no idea about this incredible world of culture and art, but I knew I was determined to explore. I started to realise when I was on a train and my mum was ringing me in a panic about where I was. She was very much freaking out whenever I got an opportunity to do something in London, but she was really worried about me. I looked out the window and I realised that life was like that train. You can't get off of it once you've started, but what you can do is you can use your imagination and creativity to build something that allows you to handle what is thrown your way. I could see my reflection in the window when we went through a tunnel, and I had all the makeup from a photo shoot and it didn't look like me. I realised that I was almost looking at myself, but it wasn't me. I was aware of it and it wasn't me. And I thought, this is really interesting because it's like an artistic channel, but it wasn't the real me. It was just something that I was wearing as an armour. That's when I realised that anyone could do this. Like, anyone could wear this makeup. Anyone could be that kind of person. The person in the reflection was one of the characters that was almost like my designs. It was a choice I made, and that person was allowing me to get to London. It was like, oh my God, I've just figured this out. If we can use this artistic channel to create something visual, you can access these different things. That's when I knew that there was a roadmap to handle what was going to come. I started to design a series of different identities and new characters. I began playing with different aesthetic choices and learning about makeup and fabrications and creating images. It was a very powerful lesson because with visual transformation, I could transform how people treated me. Each year, I themed myself in different guises, whether it was a vampire, a mermaid, an alien, a sorceress. I used my inspiration to create fantasy figures to live through whilst I kept who I was safe and able to watch out from the inside. It was so strange because I was very naive to sexuality, and I think a lot of times I was probably in quite dodgy situations with people that I had no idea. I was just naive. I was just thinking, oh my God, I'm being a witch today, but I think they probably had different ideas. I don't know what they were doing with their wands, but that's my perspective. But there we go. I started to get treated a lot differently to my friends, and that was also quite strange because they were also gender ambiguous. I was always held to this higher standard because I'd become a model and people were kind of treating me not just like with competition, but slightly with resentment, which I couldn't understand because I was doing nothing different than what they could do. They could put on the same costumes, create the same imagery. I was just creating a new character to be that day, and I didn't understand why they weren't doing it too. I started to realise that not everyone had this viewpoint. People clung on to their sense of identity and didn't realise that it was all make-believe. I remember when some people in the clubs would say, oh my God, girl, you are absolutely beautiful. You look just like Linda Evangelista. Then other times I'd see men hurl milkshakes at me and call me profanities. But I didn't take either on board as reality because it was all smoke and mirrors. I knew if I took off all the creativity I built and transformed into something quite simple, I could just as easily be inconspicuous and not have that experience. I remember for the first time I did a male presentation because I lived every single day as a femme presenting different character. And it was a shock to the system how differently I was treated. One of my friends had never seen me like that before and tried to hit on me, not realising it was me. And I was like, girl, hello, it's Jo. They totally freaked out. But it was so hilarious to me because I thought, you can really transform your experience of life. This is crazy. And it's not just because of the way you're perceived, but you can almost transmute the impact of other people. You don't have to hold on to things that hurt you. You can transform them. My life changed as a result of learning how to transform, and I began getting attention from the fashion and beauty industry. I was asked to walk in fashion shows and be photographed and to make costumes for people and to create makeup looks. It opened up the world for me and allowed me to finally explore the world map. The more I began meeting and interacting with different people, the more I learned about how differently I saw things. Some of my friends weren't processing their lives in the same way, and I tried to teach them how to do what I was doing, and it just wasn't translating. They were carrying on the backs all of their experiences, both negative and positive, and believed in the identity that they had created that time. They weren't that identity. They were just living like that for that moment, and they couldn't understand it was just temporary. They were also totally in control, which I found quite a shock to the system because not many people realised that they could control elements of what was going on by this idea. People weren't processing and digesting things or using artistic tools to see it as a separate thing from themselves. And it shocked me because I thought it was such an obvious thing to do. Everything we do as human beings is creative and transformative, whether it's baking a cake, whether it's creating something in the garden, watching the caregiver result in fruit and flowers, or when you're doing something destructive, putting hurt and pain onto paper to create something beautiful and dark, or malforming a pottery into a new creation, or ripping apart a piece of clothing to create something new. Putting your emotions and trauma into a piece of art and looking at it allows you to see that from the outside in. We are not the emotions, we are just experiencing them, and they're not facts. They're as changeable, ephemeral, creative, and destructive and transformative as the weather. But drawing the clouds and identifying them as clouds can be a pretty genius way of moving through the rain. By 18, I guess I'd been through all the physical and mental abuse you can imagine, discrimination and bullying, but I didn't see it as that. I saw it as levelling up, kind of like those video games. All my favourite characters died again and again, and then you came back to life and whacked them with a magical stick. So I changed and pivoted and transformed to the next level and used those things as a source of strength. I began sharing my work online again and realising how important it was to be in a team. Solo play never works when you're fighting against a well-assembled army of monsters, and I continued to use social media to create more artistic outlets. I began painting on different makeup characters and showing other people how to do it. I gained a cult following from amazing people in the same community as me who were learning to discover their own expressions through makeup and art, and I created some of the first viral videos sharing gender expression. I painted on a masculine look and a fake beard, and I tied my hair up and I slowly let my hair down. I took off the beard and started to paint very subtle lines on my face. There was nothing like it at the time, and people couldn't believe the stark difference between me in masculine and feminine presentation, and it blew up. I became a mermaid and people loved it. I entered my video into a reality talent show and spent a year waiting for the results, which were judged by other members of the beauty world. I never imagined that they would get it, but I was pioneering a new wave of digital content. I was turning into a variety of different celebrities, designing monsters, using prosthetics to tell stories, and celebrating my community. I waited, and all year I kept meeting with management companies, talking to brands, and being told that they might work with me on Pride. They might find something for me to do when it's a rainbow-themed event. But despite all the success I was building, I wasn't seen as an equal to the other people doing the same job. I decided to keep on trying, and the queer community all gathered around me, sharing my work, asking me to paint them, introducing me to celebrities, creating amazing artwork without needing a support system of a manager, an agent, a PR. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. In 2014, I had a really exhausting week. I'd actually not made enough money to cover my basic bills that month, and I logged into my email. It was from Sony. It said, "Congratulations, you had won." What? I could not believe what I was reading. They had actually chosen me as the winner. I was the first trans person to ever win a reality talent show, and they were going to give me the prize money. I could take my mum to Paris and even buy a dishwasher, and that was major. So again, I had transformed. I was no longer a young kid trying to be someone. I had become someone, and I no longer felt like I was on a runaway train. I could choose the destination I was heading to. I spent the next 6 months celebrating and investing into new equipment, creating my new life and planning how I was going to create the biggest career in the beauty industry. I was invited to an event in London that celebrated drag. It was fabulous and full of self-expression, but I saw someone had been making very cruel comments about me online, and I followed them to the after party. I thought they were being particularly silly, and I wanted to just stare them in the eyes and ask them to stop, because I think that people always back down when they see the whites of your eyes. But this individual did not look me in the eyes, and during this interaction, when I was trying to explain that they did not need to do this to anyone, let alone me, someone actually slipped a drug into my drink. I remember feeling very fluttery, and then I started to feel a numbness spread through my legs, and I noted that I was unable to communicate clearly. I got up in a panic, thinking in a desperate state that my best bet was to get in a cab, get the cab driver to take me to the train station, and someone from the event could help me get home to Brighton. But that wasn't what happened. I managed to get about 10 streets away before two men spotted me in a very vulnerable position, and they attacked me. I tried to defend myself, and I was knocked unconscious into the concrete. I woke up in a hospital in London and discovered I could not see out of my left eye. I was very, very, very sick, and thankfully that took the drug out of my system. I was told that I was found unconscious and my things had been stolen. I explained I wasn't from London and couldn't find my phone. It was obviously stolen with them. I couldn't see my properly. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't function. I didn't know what had happened. But I needed to get home, and I knew that there would be all the people from the event still at the train station waiting in that 3-hour period between the last train and the first train. They didn't want me to leave, but I insisted. The staff at the hospital were fantastic and they helped me get to safety, but I knew if I was stuck in London, no one would be able to help me find my mum. I wouldn't be able to get through the train barriers. I knew if I got to that train station, I would find someone that would look after me, and thankfully I did. So this wasn't a transformation that was in the plan. This was not part of the how-to guide. Instead of all the work and everything coming together, I was left visually impaired and unable to continue to do any of my art. I couldn't do my transformation process. I couldn't see to do the makeup. I couldn't film. I couldn't step to the next phase of my work, and I felt like I'd lost my superpowers. As you can imagine, this was a life-changing situation for me, and it wasn't just about my work. It was about how I used my art to process things. I was subsequently diagnosed with PTSD, and I started to really disassociate with my body, with my environment, and I began developing anxiety attack symptoms, but it just left me debilitated. I began thinking about how I could continue on my career and how to process my trauma, and it took an entire year. I couldn't see myself objectively, and I couldn't work out how I was going to continue it, but I was rageful and so disappointed about what had happened. I think that's when I kind of transformed into somewhat of my villain era, and I guess everyone needs to have a villain era sometimes, but I took on a new identity because I was just so angry with what had happened to me. I wasn't going to be left out. I wasn't going to be ejected. I wasn't going to be abused. I wasn't going to let people do this to me and just be discarded. So I was ready to transform again. I instead reached out to a university that was teaching a master's in cosmetic science, and I told them what I'd been through. They said to me, if I get through the summer school, I'm on the course to study how to make makeup. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to use all this fire in my belly, and instead of becoming the star makeup artist that I was before, I'm going to become the formulator. I began to rebuild my self-esteem through esteemable acts and strategize what I was going to do to recover. So So I worked in the back end of the beauty industry and I began to develop products and create new ideas within corporate structures. And before long, I realised I was doing what I had always done. I was using my experience, it was negative this time particularly, to create something positive in the environment I wanted to be in. I started to process what had happened. I promise you, when I started to get my product designed into people's hands, it gave me such joy to see people using my products and creating their own looks from them. It reminded me of when I started and I felt like I was passing my practices to the next generation. I began to recover because my art took a different format. My process had transformed. It had taken on a new life, but the outcome was the same. I could use my experience, channel it into a creative output, and the connections, the new communities I was building, and the joy I felt watching other people create art did the healing. I really built a successful new character to be, and for the last 5 years, I've been happily sharing what has happened to me, what I've learned to the people who make the decisions in the beauty world. I've been able to work on DEI guidelines that offer support. I've been able to work with fertility care for transgender people. I've been working on inclusive language within all of the tech, the fashion, the beauty industries. I've been trying to teach people that when you are in this situation, you can be treated differently and we can change that for the better. I had formed a new identity, and I think doing so brought me to a different position within my own family. As always, life goes on and we can't control what happens, and sadly both of my parents went through quite horrific accidents in the space of about a year. As the oldest of me and my sister, I now have 2 beautiful nieces who are learning and inspiring me every day, but I had to step up to the plate. I had to become a carer for my mum and to take control of the situation and put my own needs to one side so that she could make a healthy recovery. So now I've been a multitude of different people. I kind of have built myself a toolkit, an artillery. All of these different people that I've been, I can be any one of them when I need to be. I can use my skills to navigate through obstacles, and it's something that I am grateful that came quite naturally to me. I understand now that this is not the same for everyone. We don't get that instinctual guide that we can see things like this. We don't get a how-to manual. We have to work out what is best, but I strongly believe that we have the ability to transform our lives through creativity. I had realised very early on that we were all being attributed a set of rules, expectations and judgments that have a profound impact on the quality of life we experience. But I have used my art to change the way we carry those experiences, and so can everyone else. You can put all of those things into something creative and see it for what it is. For me, I visually transformed myself and found different incarnations. I would never have believed as a kid I would have done what I've done now, but it means that I know anything is possible. You can do anything. You can be anyone. I discovered that I'm resilient enough to get back up when I've had an injury. I can care for other people and I can help them heal. I can show an example to young people about growth and mistakes and humanity, and I can transform those experiences into anything I choose. I began to work towards a series of support for LGBT people, developing products, brands, images, transforming my businesses to be more diverse, bringing along young people and working with charities like the King's Trust as their LGBT ambassador, putting together merchandise lines that support the trans community, and aiming towards sharing my story. I was never comfortable enough to tell people that I've been through all these things. No one knows any of this. I've always wanted to keep my vulnerability to myself. But I grew up on the internet and all of my work across the last 20 years can be seen. And sometimes it feels like within modern culture, we're reduced to just a character online, sort of like those video games. We're digitised. But unlike the stories I loved, you don't really get a character arc anymore. We have a digital footprint that people can access that prevents you from being able to move from one experience to the next because no one's being taught to process their own experiences. We need to take a breath. We need to create something that allows us to digest the world we're in. We have to remember that we all have the capability to transform. We've accumulated negative experiences, traumatic experiences, reactions, and we've learnt lessons. We've made mistakes, we've made triumphs, and we evolve. We transform because life moves on. This is why it's so important to use artistic outlets to explore and observe. We can't control what happens around us, but we can control how we transform those experiences into our superpowers. My story is unique to me. I've been able to express myself artistically through all my different channels, and I was glad that I had a sort of blueprint in those video games that I played as a kid. But we are all original and we're all individual, and when we use our own stories as a force behind our creativity, we can transform our own lives. I can imagine there are loads of people who have been through far worse situations and have totally different stories, but hopefully sharing mine could help someone else. We can't control what's going on around us, but we can create. That's the power of transformation. Thank you for having me. Oh, really? Oh, ich kann sprechen ein bisschen. Ja, ich studiere in Deutsch für mein Abitur. I'm terrible though. Oh, good. Oh, and no one knows. I didn't share it, but no one knows I've been through this, and that's the reason why I stopped my makeup work because I just didn't want anyone to know that it had happened to me. And it's like I think if people are going to be like, "What the hell?" Yeah. Mm. Yes. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Well, to that person that did that to you, they've shaped you into the incredible person you are, and I'm sure your thesis will reflect the beauty of that. Oh, well, I am. I would love to have the opportunity to present this on stage. I hope you guys choose me. Oh, thank you so much. If you need anything else from me, if I can provide anything, let me know. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Yes. Fine. Hmm. And what would be the time frame? Sure. Well, Like when kind of would the speech be taking place if that was the next step? Okay, cool. Well, I will free up that date just in case I get it. And I so appreciate your time, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't do this morning, but I'm grateful that you came and saw me. All right, my love. Is there anything else you need from me? Oh, oh. Oh, thank you so much, lovely. Well, have a lovely weekend, and I'll look out for an email. Thank you. Bye. You too. I booked it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it on the 29th. She said March. She said I have goosebumps.